Growing up, my father was my hero. He coached my baseball team, taught me how to fix a car, and was the loudest voice cheering at every game I played. Everyone in our small town said he was the perfect dad. Last month, after he passed away from a sudden heart attack, I was cleaning out his old study. I found a locked metal box hidden under the floorboards. Inside were hundreds of letters, all written to a boy named Daniel. Letters spanning 28 years. Letters from my father telling this boy how much he loved him, how proud he was, and how sorry he was that he could never be there. The last letter was dated 2 weeks before my father died. Said, "Daniel, I know I can never be the father you deserved. But please know that you were never a mistake. You were the son I always wanted, the one I was forced to hide from the world." My name is Ryan. I'm 34 years old. I live in a quiet town just outside Portland, Oregon, where I work as a high school baseball coach and part-time carpenter. For as long as I can remember, my father, Richard Callahan, was the center of my universe. He was the kind of dad other kids wish they had. He coached my little league team for 8 straight years. He taught me how to change oil in a car, how to throw a perfect curveball, and how to be a man who keeps his word. He worked as a foreman at the local lumber mill for 35 years, came home every night smelling of sawdust and pine, and still had energy to play catch with me in the backyard until the streetlights came on. When my mom left us when I was 12, he didn't fall apart. He just pulled me closer and said, "It's you and me now, kid. We'll be okay." And we were. We built a good life together, simple, steady, and full of love. So when he died suddenly from a heart attack 6 weeks ago, the whole town showed up at his funeral. People told stories about how he helped them fix their roofs, coached their kids, or quietly paid their bills when times were tough. I stood at the podium and told everyone that my father was the best man I'd ever known. I believed every word. After the funeral, I spent days going through his house, the same small blue house I grew up in. I packed up his clothes for donation, sorted through old tools in the garage, and finally moved to his study at the back of the house. That's where I found it. Under a loose floorboard near his old oak desk was a small, heavy metal box. It was locked. No key in sight. I almost set it aside, thinking it was just old tax papers or something boring. But something made me pry it open with a screwdriver. Inside were hundreds of letters, neatly tied with rubber bands by year. Every envelope had the same name written on it in my father's strong, familiar handwriting. Daniel Callahan. Not Ryan. Daniel. I sat down on the dusty floor, heart pounding, and opened the first letter. It was dated March 12, 1997, the year I turned 6. Dear Daniel, today you turn 1 year old. I wish more than anything I could be there to see you blow out your candle. Your mother sent me a photo. You look so much like me it hurts. I'm so sorry I can't be the father you deserve right now. Things are complicated here. But I think about you every single day. I love you, son. My hands started shaking. I wasn't an only child. I had a brother. A secret brother named Daniel who was born the same year as me. I kept reading, letter after letter, year after year. My father wrote to Daniel on every birthday, every Christmas, and many random days in between. He told him about baseball games, about how much he missed him, about how he wished he could be there to teach him how to throw a ball or fix a bike. He never once mentioned me in those letters. Not once. The last letter was dated only 2 weeks before my father died. Dear Daniel, I know I don't have much time left. The doctors say my heart is giving out. I wish I had been brave enough to tell you the truth while I was still alive. You were never a mistake. You were the result of the only real love I ever knew before I married Ryan's mother. I was young and scared and made the wrong choice. I chose to stay in a marriage that was already broken because I was afraid of what people would think. I hope one day you can forgive me for not being there. And Ryan, if you ever find these letters, I'm so sorry, son. I was never the hero you thought I was. I was just a man who lived with a secret too heavy to carry. I love you both. I sat there on the cold wooden floor surrounded by decades of my father's hidden love for another son, and I felt something break inside me. The man I had worshipped my entire life, the man who taught me what it meant to be a father, had been living with a secret family I never knew existed. And now he was gone, leaving me with questions I could never ask him. I sat on the dusty floor of my father's study until the sun went down, surrounded by decades of letters I was never meant to see. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I opened envelope after envelope. Each one was dated carefully. Each one began the same way. Dear Daniel. Some letters were short, just a few lines wishing him a happy birthday or telling him about a baseball game my father had coached. Others were long, pages filled with my father's regrets, his love, his excuses. In one letter dated 2003, when I was 12 and my mother had just left us, he wrote, Daniel, your brother Ryan is hurting right now. His mother left us. I wish I could tell him about you, that he has a brother out there who might understand what it feels like to have a father who's never fully there. But I'm too scared. I'm a coward. I chose to stay in this broken marriage for Ryan's sake, and now I'm paying for it every day. I love you both. More than you'll ever know. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. All those years I thought I was the only son. The center of his world. The one he stayed for. Now I realized I was only half the story. I kept reading, tears blurring the words. There were photos tucked between some letters, pictures of a boy who looked so much like me it was eerie. Same eyes. Same crooked smile. Daniel at age 5, 10, 15, always alone in the pictures, never with my father standing beside him. The pain was physical. I spent the next 3 days in that study, barely eating, barely sleeping. I read every single letter. Some I read multiple times, trying to understand the man I thought I knew. My father had met Daniel's mother, a woman named Laura, during a work trip to Seattle in 1995. It was a brief affair. Laura got pregnant. She wanted to keep the baby. My father, already married to my mother and with me on the way, panicked. He chose to stay silent. He sent money every month, wrote letters, but never once visited Daniel in person. He was terrified that if the truth came out, he would lose everything. His marriage, his reputation in our small town, and me. In the final letter, written just 2 weeks before his heart attack, he said, Daniel, I'm dying. The doctors don't know it yet, but I can feel it. My heart is tired from carrying this secret for 28 years. I wish I had been brave enough to tell Ryan the truth while I was still alive. He deserves to know he has a brother. You both deserved better than a father who lived in the shadows. If Ryan ever finds these letters, tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I loved him with everything I had. Tell him I was never the hero he thought I was. I was just a man who was too scared to be honest. I love you both. I closed the last letter and sat there in the dark for a long time. The man who taught me to always tell the truth had lived the biggest lie of all. The man who coached me, cheered for me, stayed when my mother left, had another son he never once held. I didn't know whether to hate him or mourn him more. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery and sat by his grave for hours. The stone was still fresh, the grass not yet fully grown over it. I spoke to him out loud for the first time since the funeral. You were my hero, Dad. You really were. And now I find out you had another son you never told me about. How am I supposed to feel? Angry? Sad? Relieved that I'm not alone? I don't know what to do with this. I don't know if I even want to find Daniel. But I can't pretend I never saw these letters. You left me with the truth, and I hate you for it. But I also love you more than I can say. I cried until there were no tears left. When I finally stood up to leave, I made a decision. I was going to find Daniel. Not to confront him. Not to destroy his life. I just needed to know who my brother was. And maybe, just maybe, I needed to understand the man my father really was. The decision to find Daniel didn't come easily. For the first few days after discovering the letters, I walked around in a fog. I went to work, coached the high school baseball team, smiled at parents, and pretended everything was normal. But at night, when the house was quiet, I sat at the kitchen table with the metal box open in front of me and read the letters again and again until the words blurred. My father had lived 2 lives. One with me, the visible, proud, small-town life everyone knew. One with Daniel, hidden, guilty, filled with love he could never openly give. I kept asking myself the same questions. Why didn't he tell me? Was I not enough? Did he love Daniel more than he loved me? The anger came in waves. Sometimes I wanted to scream at his grave. Sometimes I wanted to burn every letter. But mostly, I felt a deep, aching sadness for the man who carried this secret for 28 years and died with it still inside him. On the fifth night, I made a choice. I opened my laptop and started searching. Daniel Callahan. Born March 12, 1996, in Seattle, Washington. Mother, Laura Callahan, née Thompson. No father listed on the birth certificate. It didn't take long to find him. He was 34 years old, just like me. He lived in Seattle, worked as a high school history teacher and baseball coach, the same professions my father had. He had a wife and 2 young daughters. His Facebook profile showed a man who looked eerily like me, same jawline, same eyes, same slight crooked smile when he laughed. I stared at his photos for hours. This was my brother. A brother I never knew existed. The next morning, I drove to Seattle. I didn't call him. I didn't message him. I just needed to see him with my own eyes. I parked across the street from his house, a modest 2-story home with a basketball hoop in the driveway and kids' bikes scattered on the lawn. I sat there for almost 2 hours, heart pounding, until the front door opened. Daniel stepped out carrying a little girl on his shoulders. He was laughing at something she said. The same laugh I remembered hearing from my father when we played catch in the backyard. I felt tears burn in my eyes. He looked so much like Dad. And so much like me. I watched as he kissed his wife goodbye, helped his daughters into the car, and drove off. A normal, happy family. A family my father had helped create but never got to be part of. I didn't approach him that day. I drove back to Portland in silence, the letters sitting on the passenger's seat like a living thing. That night, I sat down and wrote the hardest letter I had ever written. It wasn't to Daniel. It was to my father. I found the box. I read every letter. I don't know whether to hate you or thank you. You were my hero. You were the man who taught me how to be strong, how to be honest, how to show up. But you also lived with a lie so big it defined your entire life. I have a brother. I have nieces. I have a whole other family I never knew about. I don't know if I'll ever tell Daniel the truth. I don't know if he even wants to know. But I do know this. I forgive you. Not because what you did was right, but because I understand now how heavy secrets can be. And because no matter what, you were still my dad. I love you, Ryan. I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and drove back to the cemetery the next morning. I placed it on his grave, under a small rock so the wind wouldn't take it. Then I sat there for a long time and cried, not just for the father I lost, but for the father he could never fully be. When I finally stood up to leave, I made another decision. I was going to find a way to tell Daniel. Not to destroy his life. Not to demand anything from him. But because after 28 years of secrets, someone deserved to know the truth. And maybe, just maybe, 2 brothers who grew up missing the same man could finally find each other. It took me another 2 weeks to decide. Every night, I sat in the living room, opening that metal box to read and reread my father's letters. There were moments I was so angry I wanted to tear them all to shreds. There were times I cried until I ran out of tears. And there were moments I just sat in silence, staring at the photo of Daniel at 15, a boy who looked so much like me it was haunting. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know if Daniel even wanted to know the truth. All I knew was that if I stayed silent, I would become the one keeping the secret, just as my father had for 28 years. And I didn't want to be that person. I tracked down Daniel's address online. He lived in Seattle, just a 2.5-hour drive from Portland. He was a history teacher and a baseball coach at a public high school. He had a wife and 2 young daughters. His Facebook photos showed a smile just like my father's, wide, sincere, and slightly crooked to one side. I drafted a 4-page email, then deleted it. I wrote it again, then deleted it again. Finally, I just wrote one short sentence. Daniel, my name is Ryan Callahan, son of Richard Callahan. I just found the letters my father wrote to you over the last 28 years. If you want to know the truth, I'm ready to meet you. No pressure. Just the truth. Ryan. I hit send before I could change my mind. 3 days later, he replied, Ryan, I know who you are. My father told me about you many times. I always thought of you as the older brother I'd never get to meet. I want to meet you. Is tomorrow okay? I can drive down to Portland. Daniel. We agreed to meet at a small cafe by the Willamette River on Sunday afternoon. The air was crisp and yellow leaves littered the streets. I arrived 20 minutes early. Sitting at an outdoor table, my hands shook as I gripped my black coffee. My heart was pounding just like it did during the state finals in my senior year of high school. Then I saw him. Daniel walked into the shop, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. He looked around, and when our eyes met, we both froze for a moment. He looked so much like my father it was painful. He approached me, his voice husky. Ryan? I nodded and stood up. We didn't hug. We only shook hands, a long, trembling handshake, like two strangers trying to reclaim something lost long ago. We sat down. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Daniel broke the silence, his voice deep and gentle. My father, Richard, he wrote to me for 28 years. But he never met me. He said he had another family. That he had a son named Ryan whom he was very proud of. I swallowed hard, my eyes stinging. He was my hero, I said. I thought he was perfect. Until I found the box. I pushed the metal box toward him. Daniel opened the lid. He pulled out a random letter, read a passage, and his eyes reddened. He didn't cry, but I could see the intense effort it took to hold it back. He loved you, I said softly. He loved you so much that he felt he had to hide you to protect the family he already had. And he loved me so much that he didn't dare tell me the truth. Daniel nodded, his voice thick with emotion. I always thought I was a mistake. A shameful secret. Now I know. I was a part of him. And so are you. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about his mother, Laura, who raised him alone and never spoke a bad word about my father. He spoke of the nights he dreamed about the father he never met. I told him about baseball practices, fishing trips, and the times my father taught me how to be a man. We cried. We laughed. We shared long silences. Before we parted, Daniel looked at me and said, I don't need you to consider me a brother right away. I just want you to know. I'm so glad I finally got to meet you. And I'm sorry our father wasn't brave enough to let us meet sooner. I nodded, my voice wavering. I'm sorry too. But at least, we have each other now. We hugged for the first time before he got into his car to head back to Seattle. As his car faded into the distance, I stood alone by the river in the biting autumn wind. I took out my phone and sent Daniel a short text. Thanks for coming. Next time you're in Portland, let's grab a beer and trade stories about Dad. Ryan, your big brother. I smiled as I typed the words, Big Brother. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief. My father wasn't a perfect hero. He was a human being, with flaws, with love, and with fears. But he had left me the greatest gift of all, a brother. And through that, he taught me one final lesson. The truth might hurt, but secrets are what truly kill us. I walked back to my car, turned on the radio, and drove home through the golden sunset. For the first time since my father died, I didn't feel empty.